Wait, before you skip this video, just imagine this for a second. You wake up one day, and you're 60 years old. Your body is slower, your energy is gone, and life feels quieter than it used to. You sit alone, maybe in a small room or on a bench in a silent park. And suddenly, your mind starts going back. Not to your successes, but to your missed chances. The dreams you once had, the goals you once talked about, the life you once believed you would live. And then it hits you. A painful, heavy realization. You didn't fail, you just never tried. Let that sink in. Not because you weren't capable, not because life was unfair, but because you kept saying, "I'll start tomorrow." Tomorrow turned into next week. Next week turned into next year. And before you even realized it, decades were gone. Now ask yourself honestly, what scares you more? Failing and learning, or sitting at the end of your life wondering, what if I had just started? Because this isn't just a story. This is happening to real people. People who had talent. People who had dreams. People who had time. But they lost everything to one silent enemy: delay. And the scariest part? It doesn't feel dangerous. It feels comfortable. It feels like, I still have time. But that thought, right there, is how people lose their entire life without even noticing. In this video, you're going to hear the story of two people who didn't waste 1 year, not 5 years, but decades of their life. And when they finally realized the truth, it was too late to go back. Too late to fix it. Too late to become who they were meant to be. But here's why you need to watch till the end. Because their story can save yours. You're going to see exactly where they went wrong. The small decisions that destroyed their future. And most importantly, how you can avoid becoming them. So don't treat this like just another video. Treat it like a warning. Because if you hear this message at the right time, it can completely change your life. But if you ignore it, you might remember this moment one day, and wish you had listened. So stay with me, because what you're about to hear might be the wake-up call you didn't know you needed. Arif was only 22 when he first said the words that would quietly shape the next decades of his life. "I'll figure it out later." At the time, it didn't feel dangerous. In fact, it felt normal. He had just finished his studies. Life was wide open. People around him said things like, "Enjoy your youth," and "You've got plenty of time." And honestly, they weren't wrong. He did have time. But what no one told him was this: time doesn't disappear suddenly. It fades quietly, day by day, unnoticed. At first, Arif had energy, ambition, ideas. He would sit late at night imagining a different future for himself. Maybe he'd start a business. Maybe he'd create something meaningful. Maybe he'd become someone people respected. But every time the moment came to actually start, something held him back. It wasn't fear exactly. It wasn't laziness either. It was something far more dangerous. Comfort mixed with delay. He told himself, "I'll start next month. Then, let me enjoy this year first. Then, I just need the right moment." And just like that, action was replaced by intention. Days turned into a routine. Wake up late. Scroll through his phone. Watch videos. Meet friends who were just as uncertain as he was. Talk about dreams, but never act on them. And the scary part? It felt completely fine. There was no immediate consequence. No punishment. No alarm telling him he was wasting time. That's how the illusion works. When you waste a day, nothing seems to happen. But when you waste years, everything has already happened. At 24, Arif noticed some of his friends starting to move forward. One launched a small online business. Another learned a skill and started earning. Someone else moved to a new city chasing opportunities. For a moment, he felt a spark of urgency. Maybe I should start too. But then came the familiar thought. I'm still young. I have time to catch up. And just like that, the urgency faded. That's the trap. The belief that you can always start later. At 26, life became a little more serious. Family expectations grew. Financial pressure slowly appeared. Questions like, "What are you doing with your life?" started showing up more often. This time, Arif felt it deeper. He knew he should act. But instead of taking action, he looked for the perfect plan. He spent hours thinking, researching, planning, but not doing. Because starting felt uncomfortable. And the mind always prefers comfort over growth. So instead of building something real, he built an illusion of progress. "I'm thinking about it. I'm planning it. I'll start soon." But soon is a dangerous word. Because soon has no deadline. At 28, something subtle changed. The excitement he once had started to fade. Not completely, but enough that it became easier to ignore. Dreams that once felt urgent now felt optional. He still believed he would do something big. Just not today. And that's how years disappear, not with a decision to give up, but with a decision to delay. At 30, reality hit a little harder. He looked around and saw people his age building lives, careers, families, achievements. For the first time, he felt behind. Not extremely behind, but just enough to feel uncomfortable. And again, that voice returned. "It's okay. You can still catch up." So he made a promise to himself. "This year, I will change everything." But change doesn't happen because of promises. It happens because of actions. And Arif still hadn't learned that lesson. The same habits stayed. The same delays continued. The same comfort controlled his decisions. Years kept moving. And slowly, something inside him started to weaken. It was his belief in himself. Because every time you delay something important, you don't just lose time. You lose trust in yourself. At 32, he no longer said, "I'll start tomorrow," with confidence. Now it sounded more like hope than certainty. At 35, he stopped talking about his dreams as much. Not because they disappeared, but because saying them out loud started to feel painful. Because deep down, he knew. He wasn't becoming the person he once imagined. And the hardest part? There was no single moment where everything went wrong. No big failure. No dramatic collapse. Just small, repeated delays. Small, daily choices to stay comfortable. Small decisions to wait instead of act. And those small choices quietly built a life he never planned. That's the illusion no one talks about. You don't wake up one day and realize you've wasted your life. You wake up slowly, over years, feeling like something is missing. Like you were meant for more, but never reached it. And it all started with a simple, harmless thought. There's still time. Yes, there is time. But only if you respect it. Because time doesn't wait for you to be ready. It keeps moving, whether you act or not. And if you keep delaying your life, one day, you won't be saying, "I'll start later." You'll be asking, "Why didn't I start sooner?" Sarah's life looked perfect on paper. A stable job. A steady income. A routine that felt safe. To everyone around her, she was doing exactly what she was supposed to do. But inside, something felt off. Not broken. Not dramatic. Just empty. At 23, Sarah had a completely different version of herself in mind. She wanted to be a writer. Not just someone who liked writing, but someone who lived through stories, who moved people with words, who created something meaningful. She used to fill notebooks with ideas. Late at night, when the world was quiet, she would sit by her window and write, pages and pages without stopping. In those moments, she felt alive. But passion alone isn't enough to build a life. Because passion always meets resistance. And Sarah's resistance came in the form of fear. What if I'm not good enough? What if people judge me? What if I fail? At first, she didn't quit her dream. She just paused it. "Let me first get a stable job," she told herself. "Then I'll focus on writing." It sounded responsible, practical, smart. And that's how the comfort trap begins, not with laziness, but with reasonable decisions. She got the job. The salary came. The routine settled in. Morning alarms, office work, evening exhaustion. And at night, when she once used to write, she now told herself, "I'm too tired today. I'll write tomorrow." Tomorrow became next week. Next week became next month. And slowly, writing became something she used to do. At 26, Sarah was doing well in her career. Promotions started coming. Her confidence at work grew. People respected her. But every now and then, she would feel it again, that quiet voice inside. This isn't what you really wanted. She would ignore it, because facing it meant discomfort. And comfort had become her new normal. That's the dangerous thing about comfort. It doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like peace. But it's not real peace. It's a slow disconnection from who you truly are. At 28, she tried to come back to writing. One weekend, she opened her old notebook. The pages were filled with ideas, raw, imperfect, but alive. She started reading, and for a moment, something reignited. I can still do this, she thought. She picked up a pen, wrote one paragraph, then stopped, because doubt returned stronger than before. What's the point now? Others are already ahead. Maybe it's too late. So she closed the notebook again. Not because she didn't care, but because she was afraid to try seriously and fail. And that's when comfort becomes a prison. Because now it's not just about ease. It's about avoiding pain. At 30, life became even more structured. More responsibilities. More expectations. Less time. Less energy. But the truth, it wasn't just about time. Because people don't lose dreams due to lack of time. They lose them due to lack of courage. Sarah had time, small pockets of it. An hour at night. A quiet Sunday morning. But comfort whispered louder. Rest. You deserve it. Don't stress yourself. You can always start later. And once again, later never came. Years passed. And something subtle began to change inside her. She stopped imagining a different life. Because imagining started to hurt. It reminded her of what she wasn't doing. At 35, she was successful by society's standards, but deeply unfulfilled by her own. She would sometimes watch interviews of writers, creators, people living the life she once dreamed of. And instead of inspiration, she felt distance. Like that world wasn't hers anymore. And the scariest part? She started believing that. Maybe this just wasn't meant for me. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't that she couldn't do it. It was that she didn't stay consistent long enough to find out. At 38, something unexpected happened. She met an old friend who had followed his passion. He wasn't extremely rich. He wasn't famous. But he was fulfilled. There was a different kind of energy in him. Confidence, clarity, purpose. They talked for hours. And at one point, he asked her a simple question. "Do you still write?" She paused, smiled slightly, and said, "I used to." That sentence hit her harder than anything else. Not because of what she said, but because of what it meant. She had slowly become someone who talks about the past instead of building the future. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her life. Not the job, not the money, but the version of herself she had left behind. And she realized something painful. She didn't fail because she tried and lost. She failed because she chose comfort over growth, again and again. Comfort didn't attack her dreams. It slowly replaced them. Day by day. Choice by choice. Excuse by excuse. Until one day, the dream was no longer part of her identity. And that's how potential disappears. Not with a loud ending, but with a quiet fade. Sarah's story isn't rare. It's happening everywhere. People choosing safe over meaningful. Easy over challenging. Now over future. And it always starts the same way. With a small decision to stay comfortable today. But that small decision, repeated over years, creates a life you never truly wanted. Because at the end of the day, comfort gives you one thing. Ease in the present. But it takes away something far more valuable. Your future self. The park was quiet that evening. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and the fading sunlight painted everything in a calm, golden glow. It was the kind of place where people came to relax, to breathe, to escape the noise of life. But for Arif and Sarah, there was no escape. Because the noise they were facing wasn't outside. It was inside. They sat on an old wooden bench, two strangers at first, until a simple conversation turned into something much deeper. It started casually. A few words about the weather. A small smile. A polite exchange. But then came the question that changed everything. So, what do you do? Arif paused. Sarah hesitated. Because for the first time in a long time, that question didn't feel easy to answer. Not because they didn't have jobs or lives, but because they both knew they weren't living the life they once wanted. Arif finally spoke. I worked in different places. Nothing permanent. Just, life happened. Sarah nodded slightly. I have a stable job, she said. Been there for years. On the surface, those answers sounded normal. But beneath them, there was something heavy. Unspoken. Unresolved. And somehow, they both felt it. So the conversation went deeper. They began talking about the past. Not the recent past, but the version of themselves they used to be. The younger versions. The hopeful versions. The versions that believed anything was possible. Arif looked down at his hands and said quietly, I had plans. Big ones. I always thought I'd do something meaningful. Sarah gave a small, bittersweet smile. Me too. There was a long pause. Not awkward, just honest. Because in that silence, they both understood something without needing to say it. They didn't become who they thought they would. And then came the realization, the kind that doesn't hit all at once, but settles slowly and deeply. Arif leaned back and sighed. I kept waiting for the right time, he said. I thought, one day everything would align. I'd have clarity, confidence, opportunity, and then I'd start. He shook his head slightly. But that day never came. Sarah looked at him, her eyes reflecting the same truth. I was just scared, she admitted. Scared of failing. Scared of losing what I had. So I stayed where it was safe. Another pause. This one heavier. Because now the truth was fully in the open. Different paths. Different choices. But the same ending. Regret. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just deep and undeniable. Arif spoke again, his voice quieter now. You know what hurts the most? Sarah didn't answer. She already knew. It's not that I failed, he continued. It's that I never really tried. Those words hung in the air. Because they carried a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Failure fades. You recover. You learn. You move on. But regret. Regret stays. Sarah felt it too. She looked out at the path ahead of them, people walking, talking, living. And she wondered how many of them were unknowingly walking toward the same feeling. I used to write, she said softly. Arif turned to her. Used to. She nodded. I loved it. It was the only thing that made me feel like myself. Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. But I kept putting it off. I told myself I'd come back to it when life was more stable, when I had more time, when I felt ready. She took a deep breath. I never went back. And in that moment, something became painfully clear. Dreams don't disappear suddenly. They fade when they're ignored long enough. Arif looked at her and said something that surprised even himself. Do you think it's too late? It was a simple question. But it carried years of hesitation, doubt, and missed chances. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't simple. Yes, they were older. Yes, they had responsibilities. Yes, the energy, time, and opportunities weren't the same as before. But the deeper truth was this. It wasn't just about time. It was about identity. They had spent so many years not acting, that they no longer saw themselves as the kind of people who do. And that's what regret really does. It doesn't just remind you of what you didn't do. It changes how you see yourself. Arif no longer saw himself as someone capable of building something big. Sarah no longer saw herself as a writer. Not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked action for too long. The sun was almost gone now. The park grew quieter. And with that quiet came clarity. A painful kind. Arif spoke one last time, his voice filled with honesty. If I could go back, I wouldn't wait. Sarah nodded. If I could go back, I wouldn't be so afraid. And that's the lesson most people learn too late. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need complete confidence. You don't need guarantees. Because waiting for those things is exactly how time slips away. They both sat there, not saying much anymore. Because there was nothing left to explain. The truth was already clear. They hadn't lost their lives in a single moment. They lost them slowly. Through hesitation. Through comfort. Through delay. And now, all that was left was awareness. And a quiet question that echoed in both their minds. What if I had started when it mattered? That question doesn't come with an answer. Only a feeling. A heavy, lingering feeling that stays long after the moment passes. And the hardest part, by the time you truly understand it, you can't go back and change it. That's why this moment matters. Because somewhere, right now, someone is at the beginning of the same path. Saying the same words. I'll start later. Not realizing that later is where regret is waiting. Now everything changes. Because this isn't just their story anymore. It's your turning point. Arif and Sarah didn't fail because they were incapable. They didn't lack intelligence, talent, or opportunity. They failed because of small, repeated choices. Choices that seemed harmless in the moment, but became life-changing over time. And the truth is, those same choices are in front of you every single day. The difference? You're aware of them now. And awareness gives you power, if you use it. 1. Stop waiting for the right time. The biggest lie that steals people's lives is simple. I'll start when everything is ready. But here's the reality. There is no perfect moment. There is no day where you suddenly feel fully confident, fully prepared, and completely fearless. That moment doesn't come. Because clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. Arif waited for years thinking one day he'd feel ready. But readiness is built, not found. So instead of asking, when should I start? Ask yourself, what can I do today, even if I'm not ready? Because starting imperfectly is always better than waiting perfectly. 2. Break the comfort cycle. Comfort is quiet. It doesn't look like danger. It feels like safety. But over time, it becomes a cage. Sarah didn't lose her dream in one decision. She lost it through daily comfort. Choosing rest over effort. Choosing ease over growth. Choosing later over now. And here's the truth you need to accept. Growth will always feel uncomfortable. If it feels easy all the time, you're not growing. So start building a new habit. Do something uncomfortable every day. Not something extreme. Something small. Speak up when you normally stay silent. Work on your goal when you feel tired. Learn something new instead of scrolling. Because discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's proof you're moving forward. 3. Take control of your time before it controls you. Time is the most valuable thing you have. But most people treat it like it's unlimited. They waste hours without thinking, and then wonder where their life went. Arif didn't lose his future in one big mistake. He lost it in thousands of small moments. One more video. One more delay. One more excuse. And those small moments added up to years. So here's what you need to understand. Your life is not built in years. It's built in days. What you do today matters. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. If you spend today growing, even a little, you're moving forward. If you spend today avoiding, you're falling behind. So take control. Set a clear goal. Block time for it. Protect that time like it matters, because it does. Even one focused hour a day can change your life over time. but only if you stay consistent. 4. Start small, but stay consistent. One of the biggest reasons people never start is because they think they need to do something big. A perfect plan. A huge step. A massive change. But that's not how real progress works. Big results come from small actions, repeated daily. Sarah thought she needed the perfect mindset to start writing again. But in reality, all she needed was one page. One paragraph. Even one sentence. Because action creates momentum. And momentum builds belief. So instead of overwhelming yourself, shrink the goal. Want to write? Start with 10 minutes. Want to learn a skill? Start with one lesson. Want to improve your life? Start with one habit. Small doesn't mean insignificant. Small means sustainable. And sustainable leads to results. 5. Redefine failure before it stops you. Fear of failure stopped Sarah. Waiting for perfection stopped Arif. But both of those fears come from the same misunderstanding. They saw failure as the end. But failure isn't the end. Failure is feedback. It tells you what works and what doesn't. It teaches you faster than success ever can. The real failure is not trying at all. Because when you don't try, you don't learn. You don't grow. You don't move. You just stay exactly where you are, hoping something changes. And hope without action, it leads to regret. So change how you see failure. Don't avoid it. Use it. Because every successful person you admire failed more times than you can imagine. The difference is, they didn't stop. 6. Build the identity of someone who acts. This is the most important step. Because your life doesn't change just from what you want. It changes from who you become. Arif saw himself as someone who would start one day. Sarah saw herself as someone who used to dream. And those identities shaped their actions. So if you want a different life, you need a different identity. Start telling yourself, I'm someone who takes action. I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who doesn't wait. And then prove it, through small actions every day. Because identity isn't built through words. It's built through repetition. Every time you act, you reinforce who you are becoming. Final message. Your future is watching you. One day, you will sit and reflect on your life. Just like Arif. Just like Sarah. And in that moment, nothing will matter more than this question. Did I try? Not, was it easy? Not, was I perfect? Not, did I have enough time? Just, did I give it a real chance? Because if the answer is yes, even if you fail, you'll feel peace. But if the answer is no, that's where regret begins. So don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for fear to disappear. Start now. Even if it's messy. Even if it's small. Even if it's uncomfortable. Because decades don't disappear in one day. They disappear in the days you choose not to act. And right now, you still have a choice.